Welcome to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
I'm Shannon Lawrence.
And I'm MB Partlow.
Quick content warning before we get started. This podcast may contain language and disturbing content, so enter at your own risk.
Hi. Hello.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm swell.
Like we haven't been sitting here for 2 hours.
All right. Talking to another person. By now, we know how we are.
I don't know why that just really... By now, we know how we are.
That's right.
That's just such a deep statement.
So philosophical.
That's the word.
That's also not true if you think about it in a philosophical way. By now, we know how we are.
Not who, but how.
Mm-hmm.
So, I have to ask if you've ever seen the movie The Protégé.
Who's in it?
So, Samuel L. Jackson is in it, and Maggie Q, and Michael Keaton.
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
So, it came out, I think it came out last year. Possibly.
But no.
Then no more than 2 years ago. So, Samuel L. Jackson rescues, well, he doesn't really rescue her because she shoots the men herself. When she's a child, her family is kidnapped and she shoots the men who kidnapped him, and Samuel L. Jackson discovers her and raises her, adopts her. She's his protege.
Okay.
And they're assassins, but they only assassinate bad guys.
Good.
So...
Why does this sounds familiar, but I might have just seen the preview.
So her cover is that she owns a bookstore. So Michael Keaton comes in and is flirting with her and tells her to call him, and turns out later he's the villain, or he works for the villain. Here's the thing. Here's the reason I wanted to know why
Yeah.
Please just edit that out.
So if I had seen it.
So the reason I wanted to know if you had seen it or not was because there's a scene in the movie where Michael Keaton and Maggie Q are fighting.
Uh-huh.
First of all, when this was filmed, I did the math. I looked it up. Maggie Q was 42.
Uh-huh.
Okay. We're going to skip over the fact that she could play 25 with no problem.
Yeah.
She's fucking... Anyway, gorgeous. Michael Keaton was 70 when this was filmed. I could not believe that he could hold his own against her. I'm like, she's younger. He's
always struck me, like, watching Michael J. Fox,
mm-hmm.
that I swear they both have ADHD. Like, they both are. Have you ever noticed Michael Keaton is basically bouncing on his heels the whole time he's on screen?
Yes.
Robert Downey Jr. is in that category too, but I knew that even more when I saw him in an interview and went, ha ha ha, ADHD. So anyway, Michael Keaton has like boundless energy, so it actually does not surprise me because I feel like he's spry and energetic for his age.
I agree that he is spry and energetic for his age, but I don't think most 70-year-old men, no matter how spry and energetic, can take on a 40-year-old assassin.
It's not a real fight.
I know that.
Hey, and B, it's fiction. And so it was carefully orchestrated. There's probably moments where he is a body double and a stunt double. It's okay. Sorry.
Kiss my ass.
I do like that Maggie Q's turning up in more things lately because she's in Pivoting, the TV show, and showing up in other stuff. So that's nice because she kind of dipped out there for a while. She was on Stalker, which was a crime TV show.
I do like her. She's a good actress.
Yeah.
So
it was like seeing her.
And it was nice. Samuel L. Jackson, while he had an important role, he was really more in the background.
Also, Keanu Reeves is older than all of us think he is. Every time I look him up, I go, what? And then I probably forget again. And look at him doing John Wick.
True.
So, you know.
But he's not 70.
He's close.
He's not that close.
He's 200 years old.
He's a sequoia. He's actually a tree.
Oh, he's actually... He may be a tree sprite. I would think he would be a water sprite because of his name. But...
He does not look sprightly. He looks more... If you had gone with any other creature other than a sprite...
Listen, I don't need your prejudice.
I am not anti-sprite.
How do you know what a sprite looks like? How many have you seen?
Slender.
He's slender?
No, he's just too substantial and muscular. It's like calling him a wood nymph. It just implies...
He could be a wood nymph.
Oh, he could not. And this is the level of intellectual discord we have off camera, too. Or off the mic. He's a water nymph. He's
mentally
a
stimulating is what you're looking for.
Have you watched anything lately?
Yeah, I've been... Oh, fuck. What's that Renee Zellweger show I'm watching? It's like Life with Pam or something like that. And she's playing a real-life murderer. She's playing it so well. What is it on? It's Peacock, maybe. She's playing it so well that I was so enraged by about the second or third episode that I had to look up the actual crime online. And I was like, clearly from the show, she was eventually caught for the crime. But she's just merciless. She's so awful. And she comes across, she's helping the family after, it's one of her friends. Her friend has cancer. She drops her friend off at home. Next thing you know, the husband comes home, finds her dead, calls the police. And this real life person, Pam, manages to make it look like the husband, convinces everybody in the fucking town that the husband did it, so they don't even look at her, even though she was the last one to knowingly see her alive. And, of course, ultimately, it was her that did it. They don't show her doing it, but there's no real doubt, because it's a real-life crime, and she's being... That's the whole point of the freaking show.
Right.
But here's the thing. In real life, this hasn't even hit the show yet. But I'm not going to cover it because I don't like covering anything that's being, publicized like that yet. But so the husband got convicted. He got let go a few years later because they were able to show that, the DA was besties with the judge. The lawyer for him had come from out of town and kept asking for a mistrial because there was evidence they weren't given that they asked for. So all this evidence was suppressed. By the DA. And literally, like, they were best friends. They went to each other's parties. They'd just been out for beers that week, the DA and the judge. And the judge was like, I'm not going to declare a mistrial. Go sit down. And then, like, if he objected, nope. And then just so on and so on and so on. And it was so hard to watch that massive miscarriage of justice. But Pam turns the guy's kids against him. She turns
oh my God, what a
all
psychopath.
of the family against him. And she does it all as that, like, little Midwestern...
helpful.
Yes. Like, let me make you a coffee. So the will had been changed like a week before the woman died to have her, because the woman had said, I want you to make sure that the girls... that you set up trust for the girls and make sure they get the money, and he just isn't great with money or whatever. And they were kind of looking at splitting up.
Okay.
And so she was like, I'm going to put you in here. And she dies like a week after that. Well, she never gave the money to the girls.
Of course not.
But she signed up for some plastic surgery. So yeah, I had to look it up because I was like, this is hurting my soul. So, I was like, what's your problem with this dude? Do we ever find that out in the show?
Yeah.
And then they think that she killed her mom and like all this other stuff that came out. But they opened up the investigation again. And that's why this show is in existence. But it's just good. Like, it's so twisted and it's so dark. And why we laughed in the last episode when Sue Mitchell brought up Dateline is because there's a voiceover on it. There's like a narrator. Right. Which I was amused by. At least one person on my page was like, no, this guy really annoys me. But she was like, oh, that's such and such from Dateline. I watch Dateline sometimes, like record on Hulu, but yeah. And so I just hadn't connected it. And I was like, why does this guy sound so familiar to me? She's like, it's because it's this guy. And she's worked with him because yeah. So anyway, it was just funny is that she brought up Dateline for that.
Have you seen Minx yet or heard about it?
Minx?
Yeah, it's a series I believe it's on Amazon Prime. And it's it's set in 1971. So the costuming is just fabulous. But it's this woman and her life's dream, her life's work has been to start a magazine. And it's the Something Feminist Manifesto. Raging Feminist Manifesto. That's not it, but So she goes to this pitch session in Southern California where you take your magazine mock-ups and your ideas and there's all these publishers. And all these publishers are just looking at her like, huh? Because they're all male. None of them want anything to do with her. And this one guy walks up, and he was the guy who was on, what was that show with Zoe Deschanel?
Where she lived with the roommates?
Yes. That show.
That show.
The guy who played Nick.
Yeah.
Okay. He plays the main character. He's the publisher. He comes up to her and he goes, I like your ideas. I read your magazine. I want to publish it. She's like, really? Well, he publishes porn magazines. So this is his way to, first of all, he's
always good at smarmy.
Yes. But he's not too smarmy in this. There is a touch of that. But his thing is, this is going to help him move toward legitimacy. But he also thinks he can put some skin in her magazine and it will be more popular. So he convinces her that they have to have male centerfolds. And they end up instead of calling it the whatever feminist manifesto, they end up calling it Minx. There is the first episode, they are trying to pick out their centerfold. So these guys all come in one at a time and drop their pants. And so my friend Frida was telling me about it. She goes, I will just tell you, in the first episode, there are a lot of full Monties. And I'm like, yep. And some of them I'm like, eek! There's a dog from every part of town. Big ones.
That's a way to put it.
Big ones, small ones.
Yeah, now that they've embraced the full frontal in more movies, because they realized if we're going to show nudity, we need to show men too. Which I can appreciate. But I must say that...
And you get one shot, your screen is just full, the TV screen, it's like a bulletin board. It's just covered with shots of peni.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. It was, and I've enjoyed, not because of that, but not despite that either. But yeah, I've enjoyed watching it, the interaction between these two characters. And the guy that they pick for the centerfold, because he's a firefighter.
Of course.
But he's really not, he's not going to intellectually challenge anyone, I'll say. And he reminds me, when I worked in North Carolina, I knew a firefighter and he was gorgeous. Never saw him naked, so I can't say if that stacks up. But he was also just not the smartest guy I ever met. So if you get a chance, check it out. I thought it was a very amusing show.
I dated a firefighter, and we'll just leave it at that. Not my favorite experience.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I found all these things that I'm watching now that after this long period of being in a show hole, and then I started a bunch. And so, like, I think it's called Claws. It has Niecy Nash in it. It's on Hulu, maybe. And it's
I've heard of that.
Yeah, so that one's good so far. Not a comedy. It's a drama.
No.
Yeah. And then I started okay. How late am I? I started watching House. But I'll tell you why. It was another one of those things. It was one of those things people kept telling me I'd like, and they bugged me about it so much that I refused to watch it.
Uh-huh.
So I started it, and I don't love the curmudgeonly thing. I don't know why that became such a big thing for everybody, but the show is, of course, interesting, and so I'm enjoying watching that. And then I found something called The Glades, which is like a CSI type thing, and so I'm watching that. But I just started those two in the last couple of days. So.
I saw part of an episode of the cruise ship, the crew. Below deck.
Below deck, yes.
I saw most of an episode, and it was the one where there was a fire drill.
Oh my God.
It's like, that is, if you look up clusterfuck in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure they have a video of that episode.
So much drama.
And he goes, and the captain is just, they keep cutting to the captain, and he's just shaking his head. And at one point, he's like rubbing his forehead and shaking his head because somebody yells, it's an electrical fire in the engine room. And
right, and that's not part of the drill.
Yeah,
so they just pulled it out of their ass.
Yeah, the captain's like, what the fuck are they talking about?
He's like, no, it's not.
And then he's like, so they're spraying water on an electrical fire and we're all dead.
You're right.
It's like, It's like, okay, this is amusing.
He's like the boat father.
Yes.
And then the chief stew is the boat mother because she takes care. But that makes the chief stew always like the most hated person on the boat all the time. No matter what they do, they're going to get shit for it. Just like, but they do so much work on the boat. So yeah, that's funny. I'm trying to remember who was the chief stew on that one, but I don't remember.
And there was this big drama about somebody was switching roommates and...
Yes, that happens sometimes.
I was like, wow, way to manufacture drama, because the woman who was kicking up the fuss, everybody said the exact same thing to her. You said you wanted to change roommates, so we made it happen.
Oh yeah,
but you didn't talk to me about it.
Yep. Ben, okay, so you saw the cook then.
And they're all like...
The British cook?
Yes, but you said you wanted us to make it happen, so we did.
Yeah. No, Ben is like our favorite.
Ah.
Ben is, first of all, he has the swagger of Jack Sparrow.
Yes.
His dad's an author.
Oh.
And he went to school with was it the princes?
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
But he's super down to earth. He's a people pleaser, but he gets super frustrated and aggressive in the kitchen, right? And then he always he's like, no, this is a battle of wills and I can't back down. And then he feels bad because somebody feels bad and then he backs down and he makes sure they're okay. So but just the way he talks, he's like, yeah, baby. So he talks like Austin Powers and swaggers like Jack Sparrow. And we absolutely fucking love him. And he comes back multiple times, to fill in for people in the future. And he even makes it onto one of the other, because there's Below Deck, which is the one you watch. Right. There's Below Deck Med, which is in the Mediterranean, which is where I discovered that Croatia is absolutely fucking gorgeous.
Yes.
So pretty. I was like, wait, this is Croatia? Because all we, of course, ever hear about Croatia was the bad stuff, the war stuff.
It's so lush and green.
Yes.
The pictures.
And if cruise ships are going there, then clearly it's not. There's areas that are on the Mediterranean that aren't as problematic,
Yes.
So that was where I learned some things. Are you going to start?
I am going to start because you mentioned.
Oh, did you find a transition?
I did, and I lost it. No, it was the cook being British, because this is a British story.
Oh. Do you enjoy going to the grocery store? If so, this message is not for you. But if you're like me and procrastinate going to the store, Instacart is a fantastic option to ensure you no longer have to. Save yourself a trip and go through Instacart, where you can get a delivery through a personal shopper in as little as 1 hour. My experiences have been great so far, with my personal shopper texting me before substituting another product, letting me know when they were on their way to my house, and letting me know it had been delivered, all via text. If you click on our affiliate link in the show notes or on our website, you get free delivery on your first order over $35, and you help out our show at the same time. It's the perfect time to give it a try.
I'm going to talk about the Peterborough ditch murderer.
Anything to find a name, man.
So my sources were the Year of True Crime calendar. I get more ideas off of that and fall down more rabbit holes with that. Wikipedia, Murderpedia, an article, Joanna Dennehy, ex-boyfriend tells of hell, with the baby-faced angel who became a serial killer, by Paul Byrne of The Mirror. An article from express.co.uk. Another article in The Mirror. I got a bunch of articles out of The Mirror and one out of the New Zealand Herald. And that was not credited to any one particular person.
A lot of them aren't.
Which I find odd, but I wouldn't have wanted my name on this one either.
That's why.
If I remember at the end, I'll tell you the name of the article. So this story starts in England, in Peterborough, which is in...
Where they have ditches.
Which is in Cambridgeshire, England, which is about 85 miles directly north of London.
Okay.
Because I'm like, nobody's going to know where any of these things are. So everybody, if you know anything in England, pretty much you know London. Or even if you don't know where it is, you nod and you go, oh, yes, north of London.
Oh, yes.
I do want to make it clear from the start. A lot of what are considered the facts of this case are provided by a man named Mark Lloyd, who was briefly considered an accessory either to the murders or to her escape. They cleared him later, but a lot of what is stated as fact is stuff he says. Well, we'll get to that. Okay. So And I tried to identify where okay, this is what Mark Lloyd said. So in 1997, 15-year-old Joanna Dennehy met 21-year-old John Trainer in a park where he was walking his German Shepherd. So despite the fact that there's a 6-year age difference between them, and I mean, I think the difference between 15 and 21 is big. It's not like the difference between 30 and 36. Mm-mm. 15 and 21 is pretty big. So they quickly became, everything said they became inseparable. He says he wasn't quite as wild as she was, but he says, I admit I was a bit of an asshole. And was prone to smoking pot, but he didn't drink.
By asshole, does he just mean he was an asshole or he was a pedophile?
He meant asshole.
Okay.
So he knew that Joanna had gotten into trouble at school, was drinking and stealing. It's noted later that Joanna also engaged in cutting, but I couldn't pin down when it started.
Okay.
I think it started when she was a child. But again, nobody...
Preteen seems to be a big start time.
So once the two became a couple, Joanna's parents threw her out. They apparently lived in a mansion and she had a younger sister. And
I don't understand. Sorry. Why you kick your child out? Hey, you're in a bad situation and endangering yourself, and that upsets us. So our fix for that is to kick you out of our house.
I don't get it either.
I will say there are other instances where I get
yes.
Why, but when it's that, it's like, so you just made her more in danger. Okay, cool.
Well, and it was apparently the tipping point wasn't actually their relationship. It was her getting in trouble at school for the drinking and the stealing and smoking pot.
There's so much worse behavior.
I am aware. So I think there were other things going on.
No.
His parents refused to take them in. First of all, I'm like, well, you're 21, dude. Get out. His parents refused to take them in because of the age difference. So, for the record, Trainer says he didn't sleep with Joanna until after she turned 16, which is the age of consent in the United Kingdom. Oh, yeah, totally. But, so they found a place to share in one town, but had to flee to another town after they told police about a drug dealer in the house. They had their first daughter in 1999, so that was when Joanna was 17. John says the baby was the beginning of the end because he was really delighted to have this child, but she never wanted children.
Well, gosh, she was a child.
So. She was 17. He says this was the turning point when she started drinking to excess, doing drugs, sleeping indiscriminately with women and other men. He took their daughter and left. Then he took Joanna back. She got a job at a nearby farm, but began to drink more. Okay, how much did she drink, you ask? It got to the point where they paid her in bottles of liquor. She was just drinking constantly. He said she was staggering drunk all the time. So in 2002, she was pushing past her daughter in a drunken rage and almost pushed her down the stairs. But apparently she was also very abusive to John during this.
Gosh, when you victimize a girl who's much younger than you and have sex with her and get her pregnant, that sucks.
Yeah. Boo-hoo.
But not fair for the child.
So he took the daughter and left again, this time going back to his parents. So they were apart for a year and a half. And during that time, John heard rumors that she had been in a psych hospital, that she'd been in prison, and that she'd become a prostitute. He never said he followed these up. He knew if they were true or not true. Those were just the things that he heard. But they got back together again in 2003. Joanna appeared to have her drinking under control, and in 2006, they had another daughter. John says the second birth drove her right back to the bottle, and no matter what help he tried to give her, she refused it. Well, yeah. So she wanted nothing to do with the children and became lovers with her friend Charmaine. And she would leave for days or weeks with no word. And so John kept taking her back. So she started cutting again. And there were larger and larger wounds up her arms and on her neck. Neighbors reported seeing her attack John with a cricket bat. I'm like, good on ya. And at one point, she shaved her older daughter's head. Nobody was ever able to figure out why she did that. One night, she passed out in the churchyard and slept there all night. That's where you want to find your wife or your spouse in the morning. Why, look, there's Mr. Smith asleep in the churchyard. In 2009, the turning point for John, he says they were in the living room and she pulled a dagger from her knee-high boot and began stabbing it viciously into the carpet. And he says she was staring at him with completely dead eyes. Mm. So once again, he took the girls and fled to his mother's home, and Joanna moved to Peterborough. In Peterborough, Joanna moved into a property owned by Kevin Lee. As compensation for keeping up his properties, she did some maintenance work and so forth and slept with him. Joanna was given lodging at a house that was also occupied by John Chapman and Lucas Slabazewski. So in 2013, sometime between March 19th and 29th, Joanna stabbed and killed Slabazewski. They had been people who drank and partied together. They drank together. They did drugs together. And authorities believe he thought he was meeting her for sex. But she may have actually said that's how she got him over there. Instead, she stabbed him to death and put his body in a wheelie bin for a while before dumping it in a ditch. So the following week, she stabbed John Chapman to death and also left his body in a ditch. There's a theme here. On March 29th, she stabbed to death her landlord and lover, Kevin Lee. But she seemed to be more angry with him because she dressed his body in a black sequined gown before dumping it in the ditch with his buttocks up and exposed.
Oh, yeah. That was the message.
Yeah. And one article suggested that the body had been sexually assaulted. So, Kevin Lee's wife had reported that he and the family station wagon were both missing. So the car, which had been set on fire, was found about 5 miles from where his body was then found. Gas station video footage was found with a man named Gary Stretch, whose name was originally Gary Richards, but he had it legally changed to Gary Stretch. He was driving the vehicle, and his companion was quickly identified as Joanna Dennehy, partly because at this point in time, she had had a green star tattooed on her face, on her cheek. Quick sidebar on Gary Stretch. Gary suffers from gigantism and is 7 foot, well, at that point was 7 foot 3 inches tall. His ex-girlfriend and mother of his children described him as a wimp, a bit of a wimp, said he was very easily led by more forceful personalities. He was in trouble a lot for theft and burglary and was also thrown out of his home at the age of 15. Although he thought of himself as a master criminal, his freakish height led to him frequently being caught.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
it'd be Andre the Giant committing robberies. He'd probably get caught pretty easily.
You would think.
Yeah. Joanna
and Stretch fled, but on April 3rd, the bodies of her first 2 victims were found. So, and here's where Mark Lloyd comes into this. At some point, while they're making their escape, they pick up Mark Lloyd, who's sitting in the back seat along for the ride. And what a ride it was. So from him came the statements that Joanna wanted to kill 9 men so that she and Stretch could be like Bonnie and Clyde.
Really?
And that she did not want to kill a woman, especially not a woman with children. And that she said to Stretch, "I need my fun. I need you to get my fun." After she stabbed somebody.
Okay.
So she wasn't finished. They fled by car about 140 miles to Hereford. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. There, she just randomly attacked and stabbed 2 men out walking their dogs in 2 separate instances. The first one was Robert Bariza, who was stabbed 3 times and survived. John Rogers was stabbed over 40 times but survived, mainly because passers-by came to his assistant and stuck their hands over the knife wounds.
Yeah.
And she fled. Each attack took place, it was during the day in public parks, very public places. It wasn't like she was laying in wait or gave this any thought or tried to hide it. One witness claims that Joanna licked the bloody knife as she walked away. And it was supposedly after she had stabbed these men that she said, "This is my fun." It took no time. It's 10 minutes later. Joanna and Stretch were caught and taken into custody. At her trial in November of 2013, Joanna shocked everyone, including her defense team, by pleading guilty to all charges. She said, I've pleaded guilty and that's that. She also refused when her defense asked for a delay so that they could be sure that she knew what she was doing. Now, her sister later said that she believes Joanna pleaded guilty so that she could stay in control of the situation, because control was very important to her. While Joanna was in custody, but before her trial, the prison staff found an escape plan in her diary. So, side note, if you're in prison and you have an escape plan,
keep it in your head.
Keep it in your head. Write it on the bottom of your feet. I don't know, but don't write it in your diary. She was going to disable this is gross. She was going to disable or kill a prison guard and cut off their finger to fool the biometric scanner. After the plot was discovered, she was given 2 years in solitary confinement, which started before she was even convicted and extended afterward.
Okay.
Later, she tried to sue for a human rights violation because of putting her in solitary confinement, but she lost. Because they're like, bitch, he's crazy. They're like, no.
When you're planning an escape and to chop off somebody's finger, you're going to get put in solitary.
Okay, so it didn't get less weird when she got out of solitary. In 2018, she petitioned for permission to marry her cellmate, Haley Palmer. This was after she and Palmer tried and failed to carry out a suicide pact together. Joanna developed an intense friendship with a violent alcoholic, had a relationship with another murderer, and in 2021, it was announced that Joanna and Palmer were once again intending to get married.
Okay.
It's just... Now, here's a note. In 2019, she was moved to Low Newton Prison in County Durham, where she threatened to kill Rosemary West, who I had to look up.
Yeah.
She's another serial killer who we might talk about at a later date.
We might have.
Did we?
Mm.
I don't know if we did or not.
I looked at her recently, so I feel like I might have, but I don't know.
I looked at it and I went, why, she's so very familiar, but there are like 3 in England. 3 female serial killers. I can't remember. Anyway, so Rosemary West had been at this prison and she threatened to kill her. So Rosemary West got moved. Dennehy is serving what is called a whole life prison term, which means there is no option at all for parole ever.
Oh, good. Do we even have that in the U.S.?
I don't know. News reports alternate between plans for her wedding to Palmer and indications that she has cut off all communications with Palmer. The press is just looking for shit to write about her.
Yeah, she's a tabloid superstar.
So, here's the thing. She was a deeply, deeply disturbed individual. We can agree there. But we often talk about wanting to know why people do the things that they do. She wanted to have complete control over her life and how people see her. I have to wonder. I could not find anywhere, and I looked for quite a while. I could not find anything anywhere that talked about what her life was like before she was 15 and started getting in trouble in school.
The type of parents who kick you out for something that mild tend to be overbearing parents.
And they were very well-to-do. And at one point, she indicated that she'd been molested by her father, but of course her family denied that.
Of course.
But you would, whether he had done it or not, you're going to deny it. Since she has always claimed she just wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone, my question is, was there an inciting incident in her past that set her on that path? I don't know. The fact that she was cutting.
Yeah.
And she was cutting, she was drinking, she was stealing.
She was very self-destructive.
She's very self-destructive. There's nothing, not that there has to be, but there's none of that typical serial killer. She wasn't harming small animals. She wasn't wetting the bed. She wasn't playing with fire.
You know how I feel about the triad.
Yes. I like I said, there doesn't need to be any of that.
No,
but
I feel like they tend to explore the male mindset more when they're looking at stuff like this. And just as we found with things running the gamut of mental illnesses or something like autism or something, all the studies are about the male version of it and not so much the female version of it. So who knows?
Yep.
They would have dug into the man, either that or the men are just quicker to be like, but I was abused though. You know, I have no idea.
Or is it just reported more? Because I don't know. I don't even know why. I mean, she killed 3 men and tried to kill 2 others.
Yeah.
So I don't have a great deal of sympathy for her. I'm not like Pamela Smart.
I just also didn't have sympathy for the dude that met her when he was 21 and she was 15.
No.
And he was like, she went crazy. And it's like, well, you're part of the reason that her life went downhill so significantly.
Yes. But I have to wonder what happened. And apparently she doesn't talk about it. She said her piece. She's got her 15 minutes of fame and...
More power to her, I guess.
But yeah, this is one of the ones that really made me feel like something happened there. I could be wrong, but it just really made me feel that way.
Yeah, because when it starts out with self-destruction rather than outward, like the triad and other things like that, it seems to me there has to be a reason why that's happening. Not so much the typical, obviously this person was a bad seed already and then bad stuff built this up.
Right.
And then such and such was the inciting incident. She was hurting herself first a lot. So that would indicate to me at least, and I'm no expert, that there was a lot more to it than we know.
And it just sounds like maybe... when she had children, she just didn't want to see the cycle perpetuated. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. Interesting.
So what you got?
So I'm going to talk about, I wanted to do something, it's not funny, but it's somewhat positive. Oh, in a way.
Can I do one more thing?
No. Are you going to tell me the article?
Yeah, the title of the article was Serial Killer Joanna Dennehy Launches Legal Bid to Marry Lesbian Lover.
There you go. Okay. She clearly doesn't like men much.
She doesn't have much reason to.
No. All right, so I'm going to cover a couple of vigilantes. My sources, Truth Theory, All That's Interesting, Alaskan News Source, GoFundMe, Change.org, New York Daily News, This American Life, and Heavy.com. That's for both. On Monday, February 26th, 2018, a man named Jason Vukovich was sentenced to 23 years in prison after pleading guilty to 1 assault and 1 robbery charge. He will be eligible for parole for the first time in 2023.
Oh.
But why am I giving you the end? Because it's not the sentence or the charges that stand out in this case. It's the actual crimes and the reason behind them. Although I feel that the sentence does stand out, and I'll go over that later. Jason was born June 25th, 1975, making him about 2 years older than me, in Anchorage, Alaska. At the time, his mother was single, but when he was fairly young, she married a man named Larry Lee Fulton, who adopted her boys. Jason's parents were devout Christians, and the family attended various services 2 to 3 times per week.
Oh, that's a lot.
But during evening prayer sessions at home, the boy's stepfather took advantage of the situation and sexually molested both boys. Sounds like they shared a room and there was a bunk bed. In court, older brother Joel would later be quoted as saying, "We'd roll over on the bunk beds and be up against the wall. It was my job to go first, so he would leave Jason alone." They were also beaten regularly, but I feel like that pales in comparison. Fulton did end up getting charged with second-degree abuse of a minor in 1989, and this is going to make you even angrier. His sentence didn't involve prison time, and he was sent back home with the boys. Nothing was put in place for home visits or any other way of checking in on the man's victims and their well-being. In fact, the family picked up and moved, and they began homeschooling. In other words, they had no escape. Ever. Joel fled at age 17, Jason at 16. The abuse continued until they left. 16-year-old Jason moved to Washington State, where he lived on the streets. He didn't even have his ID or anything when he left. He didn't have anything. So how do you get a job if you can't? Yeah. So no proof of identification, no birth certificate, no anything.
No, nothing.
So he started committing crimes of theft to support himself. Local cops became very familiar with him. He had a significant rap sheet. He moved through Oregon, Idaho, Montana, California, and then he moved back to Alaska, still committing crimes with possession of a controlled substance and assault added to his list of theft misdeeds. But it wasn't until 2016 that his crimes grew big enough to reach national attention. Full of rage, Jason decided to seek justice for others like him. He looked up names on the sex offender registry, targeting 3 men, and decided to make them pay. All 3 men, to be clear, had been convicted of crimes involving children, ranging from possession of child pornography to attempted sex abuse of a minor. Their addresses were listed online as required on the registry. Jason wrote their names in a notebook and set out. The first one he targeted was Charles Albee. It was June 28th, early morning, when Jason knocked on the man's door. When the 68-year-old opened the door, Jason slapped him in the face multiple times. He then robbed him and told him he knew what he'd done, just made sure that he menaced him, and then he left. June 30th, Jason knocked on the door of 25-year-old Andres Barbosa at 4 a.m. With him were two women, with Jason, who had one of them used her cell phone to videotape the entire confrontation. Though Jason was carrying a hammer, he never struck Barbosa with it. He used his fist. He did threaten him with the hammer, but then the three robbed him and left with Barbosa's truck. The next time, Jason broke into the home of Wesley Demarest at 1 a.m. after knocking once. Jason used the hammer this time, so he escalated each time, clearly, hitting Demarest in the face after telling him he was there as an avenging angel. Demarest was knocked out. When he woke up, he had been robbed. He ended up with a traumatic brain injury that caused the loss of his job. Police found Jason Vukovich in his vehicle with the hammer and the stolen items just down the way from Demarest's home. So I feel like he didn't leave. That was probably where he'd parked and then kind of walked back. But that wasn't confirmed or anything. It just made sense. He had the notebook with all three men's names in it. And so the article said all three victims' names, and I refuse to use that terminology for pedophiles. There were originally 18 charges against Jason Vukovich, but when offered the plea deal that I mentioned in the beginning, he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. The condition he gave to plead guilty was that his sentence should not be longer than the terms his victims received for their crimes. So the three pedophiles stacked end to end, he said his term should not be longer than theirs, which is more than fair. Sadly, his sentence was much longer than the sentence his stepfather had gotten, which was all of a 3-year suspended sentence that he never served any time for. He appealed his sentence on the basis of having PTSD, but on October 29th, 2020, he lost his appeal. To be clear, he was not saying he should be not guilty, but he was saying that his past and the PTSD that he'd already been diagnosed with should have been taken under consideration.
Okay.
An expert did testify that he had been diagnosed with PTSD 5 years before and that his actions were consistent with untreated PTSD. The judge maintained the state of Alaska would not support vigilante justice. The court stated that, quote, "We conclude that the sentence imposed is not clearly mistaken," which is not a clear way to say anything.
No.
But yeah, they were just like, nah, we feel like it's fair. Jason has since said, quote, "I thought back to my experiences as a child. I took matters into my own hands and assaulted 3 pedophiles. If you've already lost your youth like me due to a child abuser, please do not throw away your present and your future by committing acts of violence." He also said, quote, "I began my life sentence many, many years ago. It was handed down to me by an ignorant, hateful, poor substitute for a father. I now face losing most of the rest of my life due to a decision to lash out at people like him. To all those who have suffered like I have, love yourself and those around you. This is truly the only way forward." On Demarest's part, he has publicly stated that he hopes Jason never gets out while he's alive. On my part, I wonder who the fuck cares what a pedophile thinks. Jason Vukovich is the first one to tell people that the acts he committed were not heroic. He wants people to seek treatment to become better and has been very vocal in encouraging others not to do what he did. His attorney, Amber Tilton, feels his sentence doesn't show an interest in rehabbing him, only in punishing him, and he feels Vukovich has been punished enough in life. And honestly, when I'm reading through this, he's written letters to, it's like the Anchorage News or whatever, and Isn't the point that we want them to realize what they've done was wrong and to clean themselves up? He's clearly done that. So I hope when he comes up for parole in 2023 that they take that into consideration. If anyone is interested in supporting Jason Vukovich, a long-lost sister who found her brothers through Ancestry.com, I don't have more of a background on that. I assume after they ran away, a little girl was born.
My eyebrows went up.
Right?
So hard, so high.
Right? But she is in contact with them now.
Well, good.
She'd been looking for them for quite some time, and that's how she found that connection. Her name is Angelina Lozano, has started a GoFundMe to get him supplies in prison, and has posted a book wish list for him because he enjoys reading. There's also a petition to free him on change.org. And I'll try to remember to put those posts up, or those links up. Vukovich's story led me to a female vigilante who relates to a story I've done in the past. On a previous episode, I discussed the femicides in Ciudad Juarez. And in that story, I mentioned that bus drivers who drive women to the factories, and there aren't like school buses, so school children take these buses as well, are often the ones who assault those very same women when the opportunities present themselves. That brings us to Diana, Huntress of Bus Drivers. On August 28th, 2013, 7:45 a.m., a woman wearing a blonde wig or with dyed hair, with a cap, like a baseball-type cap, jeans, and a plaid shirt climbed onto bus 718, Route 4A. She went directly to the driver, 45-year-old Jose Roberto Flores Carrera, and shot him in the head before leaving the bus. The bus driver actually didn't die right away. He fled the bus, and then he died on the sidewalk. One day later, 24 hours, on the same bus route from downtown, she climbed onto the bus and did the same thing to 32-year-old. There's only one D, so I don't know if it's Freddy or if it's Freddy. Zarate Morales. So this time, though, she rode the bus for a while before requesting a stop that wasn't a normal stop. When she got to the front, she dug in her purse like she was getting her fare. And then she pulled out a gun and whispered, and this is from witnesses, "Ustedes se creen muy chingones," which meant, you guys think you're so tough.
Oh.
Basically. Within a few days, emails were sent to various media outlets. They were signed Diana, Hunter of Bus Drivers. One from La Polaca Juarez said, "You think that because we are women, we are weak. And that may be true, but only up to a point. Because even though we have nobody to defend us and we have to work long hours until late into the night to earn a living for our families, we can no longer be silent in the face of these acts that enrage us. We were victims of sexual violence from bus drivers working the maquila night shifts here in Juarez. And although a lot of people know about the things we've suffered, nobody defends us, nor does anything to protect us. That's why I'm an instrument that will take revenge for many women. For we are seen as weak, but in reality, we are not. We are brave. And if we don't get respect, we will earn that respect with our own hands. We, the women of Juarez, are strong." When I talked about the femicides, a major point that I ran into over and over was that not only did the authorities not care, but the citizens really didn't either. They managed to twist it all into being the fault of the women. A criminologist who had worked a smattering of those original cases, Oscar Menes, actually quit his job when he found out that his superiors were burying the cases. He said, quote, "First they denied the problem, then they played it down, and finally they blamed the victims' lifestyles and their families." He was running into evidence tampering and cover-ups and basically couldn't do his job and couldn't do anything about it. I suspect had he stayed there and tried to fight it and rock the boat, he would have been disappeared. Because I reported the last time that journalists were being disappeared for this. In response, undercover police were put on random buses, and those boarding were searched for weapons. Witnesses from the buses, both of which had been full at the time of the shootings, had worked with police to provide a sketch of the woman. She was thought to be in her late 50s with, again, blonde hair or a wig. It was kind of up for debate whether she had dyed hair or a wig.
Okay.
It's agreed that it wasn't her natural hair one way or another, and a darker skin tone. So, to me, what gets me is that nobody gives a shit that the bus drivers were raping women late at night when they might be the only women on the bus. And it's a shame that a similar response was never employed to protect the women taking the night buses. Two bus drivers get killed. And compared to thousands of dead women, right? At least hundreds. Raped and brutalized and strangled. And all of a sudden they can put undercover fucking cops and search everybody getting on the bus. But they didn't care when that was happening to women for decades. So, there were arrests made with bus drivers, but it kept showing, like, nobody's ever convicted. And then one guy who was convicted, but it was overturned, they forced him to admit to something he hadn't done. So they forced a confession out of somebody who wasn't. So yes, it's utter bullshit. Yuri Herrera. I don't know where Yuri is from. The first name with the last name confuses me. Author of the This American Life article, Diana, Hunter of Bus Drivers, went to Ciudad Juarez to investigate. During that investigation, Yuri questioned local women, many of whom understandably weren't comfortable saying anything.
Well, duh.
Right. Those women who were willing to say something about it felt justice was being served in the killing of the drivers. One talked about being in high school and having friends advise each other to always have a pin when taking the bus in case you ended up alone with the driver. That way you could hold the pin so the sharper part faced out just in case.
Good God.
This very same woman's sister had been raped recently to the interview by a neighborhood man who had snuck in through her window. She recognized him when he was trying to rape her. Her family discouraged her from reporting to the police because it would only mean her humiliation and no punishment for the perpetrator. After some thought, she bucked the warnings and she went anyway and was treated exactly as her family had warned. And they said, "Why did it take you so long to come in? Why don't you have any marks on your body? Didn't you fight?" To them, it simply meant that they couldn't take any sort of revenge anymore because her family was like, her brother-in-law wanted to kill the man, her father wanted to kill the man, but once she went to the police, they said, well, now the police would know who did it if we went and killed him. Like, that's the point they're at, though, that's consideration.
Oh, God.
Like a whirlwind, Diana disappeared as quickly as she'd appeared. Police have never been able to track her down, and no more bus drivers were killed, though at least one teenage girl has been raped by a bus driver since this happened. It had happened a week before the person writing that article I named. Oddly, everyone in the articles I read felt she had simply taken care of the two men and been done, but for me, if people remember, I fell down a rabbit hole with the Ciudad Juarez stories, and I didn't convey most of that because we didn't have time. But to me, it concerns me that she disappeared after saying she was going to fight for everybody. And it makes me wonder, did they figure out who it was and take care of the problem and try to keep her from becoming a martyr so that they just took care of her? Or did something completely unrelated happen that ended up victimizing her?
Do we know for sure it was the same person both times?
The description was the same. So all they know, since there were eyewitnesses and a lot of them for both, they do feel it was the same person. Okay. They cannot prove that the emails, because there were many, were sent from the person who did the shooting. And it might have been somebody taking advantage of the shooting, which would mean that they took care of the two people. And who knows what the reasons were.
Well, I could easily see the women or some of the women saying, okay, we didn't have anything to do with this, but let's jump on this and make them think.
Yeah.
They're going to...
Maybe they recognized the names and they were like,
more power to you.
Yeah. So the bus drivers got so much more protection than the women ever had. Some of the bus drivers started arming themselves, and I was thinking, great, now they're armed and they have women alone on their buses. So that can't have been great. And just a lot of things problematic came from it, but I couldn't help but feel a certain amount of satisfaction especially after reading women's individual stories when I was doing research and just seeing how dire the problem was and how little that society cared in general.
Yeah.
But they cared more about two bus drivers that got shot. And just interestingly, because I'll post pictures, the buses that they use as city buses are like old school bus style buses. Oh. What we're accustomed to, at least, as school buses. And so they have that look, but a lot of them are white. But it's still the school bus style. And they're pretty junked out, I mean, they run, and that's what matters. And everybody just accepts it as that. But a lot of people take the buses.
That's just...
But if even schoolgirls are having to take those buses and be alone and deal with whatever happens.
And your safety depends on having a big sister or mother who will tell you
to take
carry a pen with the pointed side out so you can, if you're alone, you can protect yourself.
Yes, and that's assuming that you have the trauma response that allows that and not, for example, freeze. Which is the most common response to sexual assault for whatever psychological reason. So, yeah, it's just, again, part of me satisfied. I did see also, but I didn't see specific stories on it, that there are, like, now females in Ciudad Juarez that kind of go around in a clump trying to create protection. And so they're kind of vigilantes in their own way, but I didn't read anything about them having killed anybody. And so that's why, it didn't factor the same. But I mean, And I'll be doing a story now inspired by this about a group of women in India who do similar.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
But in these regions, it's sad that groups of women have to band together to do that because maybe the society they live in doesn't care because it's so misogynistic. And that was very true for Ciudad Juarez, and Mexico in general was a very misogynistic society still. It's a known issue. India is the same.
Mm-hmm. In the first story you talked about, what was he sentenced to? What was his sentence?
He was sentenced to, I think, 23 years after he pled guilty. And then he was to have and then there was another 5 suspended and then 5 years probation afterwards. I didn't write that down, but. So he got 23 years, and the man who was molesting and beating him and his brother got
nothing.
3 months suspended. So
in effect, nothing.
But that also tells you that the 3 pedophiles got less than 23 years. He said he didn't want his to be more than theirs. So if that was actually related to it, which I could not find, then they might have collectively gotten that amount. Because we still don't, it's better, but we still don't treat sex crimes like the awful crimes they are. Like, they should be getting severely punished because what they've done is damaged however many people, whether it's one child or more. They have traumatized them for life. And in how many cases now do we see somebody who obviously wasn't okay to begin with, but then that made it worse and possibly took somebody who just would have been maybe not a great person, but maybe not a serial killer. Right. How many times have these pedophiles created more pedophiles, first of all? Yeah. So Jason Vukovic, he didn't lead a great life, and he's very honest about that. He's very honest about having stolen and had assault and gotten involved. He said, I think at one point he got into meth and just, how could he have led a good life? Nobody taught him. Nobody taught, and nobody helped him. Yeah. The system didn't help him. And his mother stayed with the man. Yes. Who was convicted. Yes. He got a slap on the wrist, but he was convicted. And she stayed with him. So what does that teach her sons? Well, certainly it could have, that's my thing though. It could have gone a different way. They could have re-victimized. They could have victimized then further children after them. They could have become a serial killer, and that, right? Like, either one of them could have become a serial killer and had that background. They could have been killing women because their mother taught them that women weren't there to protect them, certainly. And like, there's so many worse things he could have done than living a life of crime, because how do you get a legitimate job if you don't have any proof of your identity? Yeah. Because you had to run away. How do you support yourself then? It's insane. Like, where do you go? Was he supposed to go to shelters? He probably had been to shelters. I'm like, I don't know. That's a really good question, because he can't be the only kid who's ever run away with no ID. So what do they do? Many. If you can't afford fake ID, which I'm not advocating, but where do you go to get help? Right. Because the system had already let him down. Yeah. And he was 16. So even if there is a way to do it, which I would have to really look into, wouldn't I? To find out if there was a way for me to get my birth certificate and stuff like that. And it's probably different in every state. Yes. And Anchorage is, Alaska is Alaska. We'll just say that. Final frontier or some shit. That's exactly what I was thinking. Frontier. It's yeah. So who knows what they could have done there. So I don't understand. I get that there are people who make better lives. And I'm one to always say again, when there's a serial killer, that other people have been victimized and not done what they did. So it's not an excuse. I do feel in Vukovic's case, it is a bit of an excuse. I don't understand how he was supposed to live cleanly unless there had been somebody to help him. Yeah. So, and again, he's very vocal about don't do the things I've done. But he's also vocal about kids should be able to go to church and school and their homes and not be victimized. Yes. Because you say they started homeschooling. Yes. He was tried and convicted, got a slap on the wrist, came home, packed everybody up and moved them to a new place and started homeschooling. Yes. So he could victimize them all the live long day if that's what he wanted to do. And there was nobody doing it. Not that anybody had, somebody He got turned in at one point. I could not find why. I couldn't find if that was a school thing. Because, again, he was beating them with belts and 2x4s.
Jesus.
So I imagine there were marks at some points. Although he might have also been careful to keep those under the clothes, you know. So who knows? But somehow he was turned in. It sure as shit wasn't Mama.
No.
Unless there's a bunch of details that weren't released about her.
So school is likely, but if someone is going to report, I would like to think if someone is going to go to and you're required to report.
Yeah.
If you see, there are several professions that if you see abuse, you are required to report it. But was there no one who could take that extra step? And I don't know, maybe someone tried and hold a hand out to this kid and offer him some kind of help.
I see if it was the school though, that's crossing a line. Like say, you can't say, come live with me, right?
No,
I'm sure some have done it, but that's also putting yourself at a lot of risk. So but didn't they have relatives? Like did nobody cared? And I don't know what the story is with the girl. I don't know if the mom remarried or did something else. Again, none of that was out there, but it just wasn't a big case. And that's why it just wasn't widely covered. Did
it say if she was that she was younger than
She is younger.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And she knew she had older brothers. She just didn't know where they were because they'd run away. So I was thinking maybe the mom had remarried because her last name was different. Lozano, I think it was, right? It's not Lufton.
Or the daughter could have gotten married. I don't know how old the daughter is.
Yeah. She's younger. I didn't look at her and think that, but it doesn't mean it's not so. So, yeah. Maybe the mother did ultimately leave, but she sure as shit didn't leave when she should have.
And she shouldn't have had any more children.
And she shouldn't have said, yes, let's homeschool them. And I didn't hear anything. At no point did they say anything about their mom being beaten. And that tends to be a thing that boys take very seriously. And they would say something about that. So it was just them being victimized as far as I know. Yeah. So, hey, feel free to enlighten me if anybody else knows other details. But otherwise, she's on my shit list.
It's people, the things people can do to other people.
Yeah. Sad.
It is.
That's what our whole episode was about, wasn't it?
Yep. Hello. Let's talk about the cup of coffee.
The cup of coffee?
The cup of coffee.
I actually by the way, when I said it, so this is Buy Me a Coffee. In case people don't know, I actually said it so that it actually says buy us a book. Because you could choose. It was buy me a piece of pizza, buy me a coffee.
Because neither one of us drink coffee.
But it's all the same amount, you know. Yeah, right. We don't drink coffee. So anyway, we now have Buy Me a Coffee, and that's buymeacoffee.com/MM and the M's are all capital at the beginning there. 3 M's. Because there is one at the end of Mayhem, too.
There's a lot of M's.
So I didn't state that correctly. But yeah, so I only had so much space, folks. And you can donate whatever amount, or there is a way to do a monthly support. It had me plug in goals and all kinds of things.
How very splendiferous.
Because we do have monthly costs and annual costs. Yes. And we are paying to be able to bring this podcast to folks. So obviously we're not doing it to make money. That hasn't happened. But
because who doesn't want to sponsor these conversations?
That's right. Or our opinionated opinions. Boy, if you guys knew how much I edit.
Right? I love it when people think that neither one of us has a filter.
Right? And so
I'm like, oh no, you didn't understand how fully and highly developed my filter is.
Right? And then I go through and edit later and remove even more stuff if I feel that we might have not fully employed our filter.
Yeah.
So some stuff may still get through that you don't agree with, but not nearly as much as you could. All right, guys. Thank you for listening.
Yes, we'll be back with you next week.
Yay.
Have a good week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mysteries, Monsters, and Mayhem.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram or at our website, mysteriesmonstersmayhem.com.
Please rate, and review, follow, and share wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.
Thank you for listening and supporting our podcast. We'll be back next week with more shenanigans.